can't tell is
You want to put it? Is your camera strong enough to get it from like if you put it on the table back there?
it should be.
Oh, this is fine.
I'm gonna start with a poem. I don't know. It says that it's
Do you want to put it like in this second row?
here. You figure it out.
Oh,
In terms of where to put it.
okay.
Cause I'm gonna obviously be standing
Oh, you are?
when I do the poem.
Where are you standing? In the middle?
Yeah.
Floor. Okay. I remember you from that one time. Yeah. Floor. So, okay, so now I know everybody.
Chair?
So that's,
You think I can move the chair without like throw off the room?
Yeah, I think you can move it. Go ahead.
Okay. And then you can see what it looks like.
I don't know what this means.
Well,
But it
what
says
means?
orientation is locked. But
Oh, I think it just means that if you turn the camera, the camera's angle is not gonna flip this way.
so she does. I mean, it's supposed to be this way.
Are you?
Oh yeah.
You want it like that?
Yeah. At least for when I perform.
Is it recording already?
Yeah, it's live. It's YouTube live.
Oh, okay.
Good afternoon. Okay, let's do this again. Good afternoon. Thank you. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Claudine Curran-McLeod. I am the chair of the Department of Peace, Human Rights, and Cultural Relations here at SIS. And I am also a genocide study scholar, so I'm really excited about this conversation. The event today is sponsored by the African American and African Diaspora Study. I did my homework. And Sibo is the faculty representing the African Center. So this event is our first event for the Genocide Awareness Month. Today we're talking about Congo, and then we have one on Indonesia, East Timor, and then one on Armenia. We are focusing on these three different genocides this month because we're trying to highlight some of the atrocities that are not always studied or that are not as studied as we would like to in our field. Today, Professor Nwama is going to facilitate the conversation, and we do have three panelists. Do you want me to introduce you, or do you want to introduce yourself in your opening remarks? They want to introduce themselves, so yeah, let's work for me. Perfect. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Okay, so, Mother, you want to start us off? Introduce yourself, and maybe give us a little bit of a background to what's happening in Congo now.
I think I should say good evening right now, right? We're getting close to the evening. My name is Kambale Musabuli. I was born in DRC, 1981, gray hair. I'm a fortunate Congolese who happened to know a few people who were in the United States. What I'm saying, who happened to know is mostly my family, where ordinary Americans helped my family get out of the Congo in 1998. So I arrived in the US as a refugee in 1998. And that's the reason I bring that up is one of the contradictions, right? That ordinary Americans help my family, but I'm very clear that what's happening in the Congo is an extension of US foreign policy, which has taken the lives of now an estimated at least 6 million. And it's also hurtful to say, because I've been saying 6 million since 2008 when I became active in advocating for Congo. And I argue, given we have not done mortality studies since the IRC mortality study of 2008, we may never know how many millions of Congolese who have died in the conflict. So now, there seems to be a huge interest in the United States and even around the globe for people connecting injustices, right? So in the advocacy around Palestine, Congo is mentioned. In the advocacy on Sudan, Congo is mentioned. And it's important, as we even discussing it, it's not a marathon on violence and who has more death, but it's to understand that humans on this planet are dying, usually, right, that's the way I present it, due to resources on the ground, the shiny rocks. So in the Congo, we've had millions who have died due to that. And lately in the news, you will hear about M23. You say, what is M23? You know, if I start speaking about the M23 and the history, we'll be here all night explaining how it's literally the same people. Anybody remember Blackwater? You know that Blackwater is called Z? Yes, no? Anybody know that they are called Z today? Right. So for those of you who don't know, is that Blackwater, when there was a big negative press on the company, they decided to change their names to Z. So if you understand that Blackwater can change the name, then you know that M23 is a remix version of the CNDP, of the RCD, of the rebels that came into the DRC. And I think in the discussion we're going to have, I'll delve much more because for the past 3 months, it's been very difficult for Congolese in the eastern part of Congo. At least 7,000 people have died in the city of Goma. At least 1,000 in the city of Bukavu. At least 750,000 have been displaced from the eastern part of Congo, added to the already 7 million internally displaced. But all of that is happening in the context of control of the land, control of the resources, displacement, and mass killing. But we'll get into it more. And I work for the Center for Research in the Congo. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Fantastic. Claude, do you want to add anything?
Yes. Good evening, everybody. My name is Claude Gatebuke. I am a Rwandan survivor of the genocide in 1994. So the things that Kambale is talking about are things that I've actually witnessed. What happened in Rwanda in 1994 is happening in Congo today. It's been happening in Congo for the last 30 years. And so I appreciate that as we are talking about genocide awareness and April being Genocide Awareness and Prevention Month, that we are talking about modern day genocides, which what is happening in the Congo. When you look at the definition of genocide, the intent to destroy in whole or in part is happening in the Congo for access to the resources. What I would like to add in my background, my additional background is I'm a co-founder of the African Great Lakes Action Network, which is we do advocacy, we educate, we do media, and we raise awareness with the goal of bringing about peace. But our formula is that in order for there to be peace, is that the truth has to be told. The radical truth, the uncomfortable truth has to be told to lead to justice, and justice being the foundation of peace, and peace being allowing the people of the region, the people of the Congo, and the people of the Great Lakes region of Africa determining their own affairs. So what I would like to add to what Kambale was saying is, he's talking about all of these people that have been killed, that have lost their lives as a result of this almost 30-year conflict in the Congo. It's not a simple conflict. Congo has been invaded by Rwanda and Uganda for the last 30 years. And Kambale touched on it a little bit where he said, there's a paradox of being held by ordinary Americans and at the same time calling out the US government for the support of, for supporting the invasion of Congo. And Rwanda and Uganda are two of the poorest countries in the world. They do not have the type of budgets that it takes to fight a 30-year war. The when you look at the weapons that are being used today, but the M23 is really, for clarity, is a proxy of the Rwandan military. It's the Rwandan military invading the Congo and rebranding themselves with a variety of acronyms, as Kambale mentioned. I would use, if any of you follow mass incarceration, have you all heard of CCA or Core Civic? It's a private prison. It's the largest corporation of private prisons. When it was known as CCA, when there was so much noise around what they're doing, they changed their name to Core Civic. Now they're known as Core Civic, and they brand themselves as some type of real estate company, but they really do, they're part of mass incarceration. How does this connect to what we're talking about here in the Congo? The M23 is a rebranding of the very original rebels that invaded Congo in 1996, have changed names with multiple acronyms, and the most recent is the M23, and the latest one that is coming up is the AFC, Alliance for and we consuming those resources through the electronics, the green revolution that's happening now, and again, there is support by the US, the UK, the European Union, and all of these global forces, the World Bank. They provide support and backing, diplomatic, political, military, economic support to Rwanda and Uganda's regime. And that is why, for example, when the war in Ukraine started, the US, Canada, all of Western Europe, they rushed to sanction Russia because it was invading and violating the sovereignty of Ukraine. For 30 years, the same countries have not done the same for Congo. And that is because Rwanda's leaders and Uganda's leaders, Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni, serve as local mercenaries for these Western powerful countries. And so there is a give and take. They give them access, they give multinationals access to the resources, and they displace the people so there's access to the resources. And then in return, these two countries actually provide those mercenaries to not only guard the mines, to displace the people, but also to send to other countries around the world, including Mozambique, Central African Republic, Sudan, South Sudan, Haiti, Somalia, and others. And I'll stop there.
I'm glad you brought up the sanctions. We'll come back to that because that's beginning to change. That's how the European Union and Belgium and all these other places. So we'll come back to that. But let's go to Professor Omékongo. Do you want to, I'm sure everybody knows you, but if those that don't know you, if you want to briefly introduce yourself and maybe give us a view from the diaspora.
Well, I wanted to start us off with a poem to get us situated. Well, for those of y'all who don't know me, Professor Omékongo Dibinga. I've been at American University for 10 years, teaching the School of International Service. Both my parents are from Congo, and so it's a struggle that I've been involved in my entire life. And so a few years ago, back in 2002, I spent my time in camps for the displaced in Congo. And while I was there, I wrote this poem that I'm going to share with you all to get us started. That'll be kind of my introduction. Sadly, about the poem is that nothing has changed. My beloved Congo, the joke of the African continent, the world's gold, diamond, and coltan mine, Rwanda's concubine. This country of mine, poisoned with the swine that is Western policy, You see, Westerners and Asians exploit the riches, but live behind gated communities with underpaid Congolese security, so they're closing the door on fractured Congolese faces with one hand while robbing her for resources with the other. And no province is safe, because even some of our own corrupted Congolese leaders are involved in this race, but even they can't keep pace in the face of our Rwandan aggressors, annexing our spirit to their sick and stricken sinister soul, to such an extent that at one point to call Eastern Congo, you had to dial Rwandan area codes as they toyed with the possibility of introducing Rwandan currency in the East. The United Nations talks of peace, knowing full well that peace can only be attained through violence. Congolese rebel leaders becoming Congolese prime ministers can only happen through violence. Child soldiers fighting in fear of retribution on their families, joining the spread of violence, raping my mother country and spilling her black coat and blood only continues through violence. When I talk to you all about Congolese genocide of Western compliance, your response? Silence. You see, I know because I used to be just like you, sitting there smiling while other folks lie dying. Even bought my wife a diamond and probably spilled the blood of a distant cousin for it and chose to ignore it. But now I visited Congolese refugee camps to find that there's not even any refuge for refugees. Abandoned Congolese mothers and children living in tents made out of empty rice bags while lice drags through their hair and their daughters living in despair. Start having sex and babies at 12 years old with 50-year-old married men with no humility, who paid them 25 cents for their virginity and the possibility of exchange for AIDS, while the World Bank gives this absentee father of a government aid, because I'm looking for a cure for both diseases, because 6 million have died in 6 years, and too many orphans are shedding tears as they start dying in the streets at 11 years old, because even though it's hot on the outside, their inner spirits are cold from walking around starving in a capital city that barely has paved roads, and eating half a meal a day can't heal that. Living on less than $1 a month won't heal that. And since y'all only see the Middle East on the news, y'all can't feel that. And so I'm hoping that 1,000 words can be worth a picture, because the image of the Congo may not fit your stomach, but it'll fit your fingers with diamonds, your ears with gold, your cell phones with coltan, while newly discovered Congolese oil heats your house when it's cold. But y'all still don't give a damn. Even when I talk to y'all about Congolese and polio, walking as if their left knee was glued to their left hand. You see, there may be a cure for measles and malaria, but there's no medicine for misery. In the country being steered in the wrong direction, and children dying from all sorts of infection, and 12-year-old girls condemned to death because rich married men, they don't use protection, and all of their relationships end in rejection. It's like the entire country suffering from a lethal injection. A second genocide in less than 100 years that's gone without mention, along with the fact that we fight so hard to get our elections on the Congolese street called the Avenue of the Future. That's when my father was tortured and nearly died in detention. So you have to forgive me when I say the future looks bent in the minds of the people. And you see, I'm also pissed off because they say long live an independent Congo. But I don't remember when it ever was. The international community correctly condemns Congolese corruption and questioning where the ministers bought their cars from. But the world's ears become deaf when I ask where our invaders got their arms from. This is the Congo, damn it, and ain't none of it funny. Americans who work here say it's a great place to make money. Folks with connections from Bush to Trump to Bin Laden said he robbed his country up for resources through Lebanese liaisons living in the land of internationally sanctioned genocide, where pathetic United Nations plus future United States policies equals pesticide, claiming that they finally brokered peace, but don't let them fool you, because up until this day, we're still digging up body bags in Bunya, because their role in the Congo supports nothing but violence, a continual purchase of Congolese resources that never benefit the masses, compliance, possible untested AIDS drugs on unsuspecting Congolese in the name of science. Homes like this to try to wake you all up, a simple act of defiance. All I ask from my beloved Congolese people, self-reliance. But when I ask you to help me heal the hurting heart of Africa, your response?
Oh, wonderful. Well, do you want to follow up with a poem of your own? No, well, I'm kidding. But let me, since you talked about, you are also from Rwanda?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so let me ask you, can you help us understand Rwanda's role in this conflict? And can you, as you try and look at it from their perspective, about the Banyamulenge rights and the Banyamasisi and all the accusations that Kagame makes about what's happening to his people in the Kivu. So can you address that and help us understand how the Rwandan genocide is connected to what's happening in Congo?
Yes, so what is happening in the Congo today is an extension of the Rwandan genocide. Because initially when Rwanda invaded Congo, they claimed that they were going there to go after the forces that committed genocide in Rwanda. Now, 30 years later, the evidence shows that that wasn't the case because they went into the refugee camps, surrounded hundreds of thousands of people, and they shot and bombed and killed women, children, blind, handicapped people, all kinds of vulnerable people. Anybody that couldn't move and get away, they shot them. And then they had a strategy of going to places where after they had just mined or collected timber or coffee or whatever resources they wanted to access, then they would attack the site and take over the resources and smuggle the resources to Rwanda. Now we know that. So a couple years after the invasion, after they removed the long-serving dictator Mobutu, they fell out with their puppet, Laurent Desire Kabila, the person who replaced Mobutu. And they started another war. This time they said there was discrimination against the Banyamulenge, who are a group of Tutsi people, or at least connected to Tutsi people in Rwanda, from South Kivu, which is part of Eastern Congo. And then they expanded it to the general Tutsi population in Congo, which is not just in South Kivu, but also in many parts of North Kivu, Rutshuru, Masisi, and other parts. I'm going to spare you the names because I'm sure you can keep up with the names of these locations. And that's still the claim today. Rwanda and Paul Kagame claims, on one hand, that Rwanda has no troops in Congo. On the second hand, that he doesn't know if Rwanda has troops in Congo. He said this on CNN. On the third hand, I know we only have two, but on the third hand, he also says that they're there to prevent a future genocide in Rwanda. And it reminds me of a time when, for many years, during the initial Banyamulenge claims of where they claimed that there was a genocide against the Banyamulenge, which to this day, there's been documented atrocities against Banyamulenge, but there's not been any genocide claims by any outside organizations besides the Rwandan government and Ugandan government claiming that. And some of the community members from the Banyamulenge community claiming that. But the initial part, they said Banyamulenge were fighting in the Congo, and they denied for years and years. They say there are no Rwandan troops in Congo. And then all of a sudden, one day, there was a ceremony in Rwanda to celebrate and welcome Rwandan soldiers coming back from Congo. But they didn't, that third hand, right? They didn't have soldiers in Congo, but they had a celebration to receive soldiers coming back from Congo. Today, it's the same thing. They claim there is discrimination, there is hate speech, and that there's the Banyamulenge, the Congolese Tutsis are endangered. You also have Congolese Tutsis who are fighting against Rwandan invaders and Ugandan invaders as part of the Congolese army, and some of them from their own communities. And it's starting to actually fracture even further now. They're becoming more and more vocal as they're saying these groups, the M23 does not represent us. So those claims are there, but they're not valid.
Okay, so before I come to you, we're going to talk about the resolution, but let's talk about Uganda's role, because Uganda is in Bunia now. So from what I understand, Rwanda, the claim is that they went after the entire Hamwe, and then later on they said they're to defend Banyulenge, and then you are also saying that resources is in there. How about Uganda?
Uganda's doing the same thing. Initially, what is happening in the Congo, the training ground was in Uganda. It started with Uganda's current president, Yoweri Museveni, losing an election in 1980, 1981. And he started a war. They called it the Bush War. During that time, there were a lot of exiled Rwandans, Rwandan Tutsis, for the most part, who were associated with the monarchy. Among them was Paul Kagame, and who's Rwanda's president today, and a bunch of other people. Museveni recruited them. Some of them were child soldiers, and they rose through the ranks. He won the war in 1986. Yoweri Museveni has been president of Uganda for almost 40 years. Next year will be 40 years. He's still president. In fact, in a previous election, there was an age limit, and he changed his age so he can run again. Yoweri Museveni was a trainer. A lot of the atrocities we're seeing in the Congo today, things like what just happened in Goma, where people who were wounded in the hospital, the M23 went in the hospital and stabbed them to death. Those things were happening in Uganda in the 80s. False flag operations, those type of things were happening in the 80s. So now Kagame became the leader of the military intelligence in Uganda. This is Kagame, the president of Rwanda today. In 1990, Paul Kagame came to the US, to Fort Leavenworth, to train as a Ugandan officer. And then the civil war started in Rwanda. He left the US, he came to Rwanda to lead that rebellion, along with a bunch of those soldiers, some of them who were exiled to Rwanda, some of them who were Ugandan soldiers. They committed similar atrocities as they did in Uganda. They're doing that in South Sudan, by the way, right now as we speak, speaking of genocides. And then in 1994, that war led to the genocide. After the genocide, Paul Kagame and his army, the RPF, they won. And then 2 years later, they teamed up with Museveni, who trained them, and they invaded Congo, saying that they're going after the genocide perpetrators in those camps. And then today, what we have is Uganda is not only involved in Bunia, but Uganda is the one that actually took over the border post in Bunagana in this very round of fighting since 2022 with the M23. Uganda's extracting resources in the Congo. The main ones they traditionally have acquired are timber and gold, especially. And they also are occupying parts of Congo that have oil. And these oil reserves, the Ugandan military is actually there to guard them for the benefit of French oil company Total. And so Uganda soldiers are occupying the Congo. We don't hear a lot about them, and I think the reason is because Uganda doesn't actually deny that they're occupying Congo. You talk about the atrocities, they just don't say anything. With Rwanda, it gets really loud because Rwanda's government and their supporters are always denying that they're committing these atrocities, even though the people who are there, the reports, and every credible witness is seeing what is happening there. So Uganda is involved, and it's involved in the occupation of the Congo, and it's a team. Rwanda and Uganda work as a team, except that one time when they had a 6-day war, fighting over a mine inside of Congo and killed 3,000 Congolese people. The Uganda has been there for the last 30 years.
But let's come to you. So I want you to tell us about the resolution effort. So the EAC's effort, the SADC process, and the recent meeting in Doha. Is this how this conflict ends?
I want to tackle the question, and I'm worried about the room. I'm trying to read the room, right? How many of us are following what's happening? Okay.
Our students are very engaged.
Yeah, I'm getting worried because usually there is a lot of information being thrown out of a 30-year conflict that is important. I think the young man there said something to me earlier when we were talking that was important are solutions, right? After 30 years for us Congolese is how do we end this conflict? A lot of processes have taken place for peace in the DRC. From even 1996 when the first invasion started, right? To try for the Zairian government to even understand what was actually unfolding, because that invasion of 1996 was presented as a territory, Mulenge, right, will become an independent territory. That was in August of 1996. I recall this, not because it's in newspaper. I was in Kinshasa back then, and I remember what actually we were discussing. On TV, and during the same time, the president of the Congo went into a coma at the time. So there were processes for peace negotiation. After that, as Rwanda and Uganda were successful at toppling the regime of Mobutu, in 1999, all the peace negotiation took place. People flew into Lusaka, staying in fancy hotels, and then there were discussions again about a peace accord. There was also another process around 2002. This time they didn't go to Lusaka, they got to nice planes, went into South Africa, right? Where in some cities, for those of you who know, there is actually a casino there. So warlords were in a hotel, casinos, deciding peace in the Congo. But when you read in the print of what actually unfolded, you hear that Congolese came together, decided to have 4 vice presidents and 1 president. Nobody talks about who was partying, who was hanging out in the hallway, and what William Swing, a former US diplomat, did in those meetings to force a solution that didn't come from the Congolese people. Because what the Congolese said in the 2002 process was that anyone who is a rebel, who has weapons, should not be part of a new government. Right? That was what the civil society said. But through US pressure, the solution that was presented is a president with 4 vice presidents, and those 4 vice presidents are all warlords who stayed in power. Now, fast forward to now, so I don't go to all the processes. You probably have heard of a Luanda process for negotiations, where the president of Angola was leading the process up until 2 weeks ago. I think now there is a discussion for Togo to take the lead now, with Faure Gnassingbé of Togo leading the peace process. The Luanda process is a state-to-state process, where the president of the Congo and the president of Rwanda are supposed to sit down and find a peaceful resolution to the conflict. It's important to even understand it from a perspective, right? Outside of what is happening with the rebel militias, that Congo is clear about the negative forces. That we have our neighbors who have been implicated in the conflict, causing the death of millions. That a path to peace is to really come to the table and say, hey, what do you want, right? So that's the framework. There is another process that's in Nairobi. The process in Nairobi started when Congo and Rwanda was in the honeymoon phase, by the way. There was a time where the president of Congo, Tshisekedi, and the president of Rwanda were the best friends. The relation was so good that the president of the Congo flew into Kigali, went into the genocide memorial, and was interviewed about the conflict in the Congo and the deaths, right, of Congolese. The president of the Congo in Rwanda said that the deaths of Congolese were just collateral damage. And this actually angered many Congolese when we heard that, right? How can the president of the Congo, knowing that Rwanda is an invader, and cause the death, and these were collateral damage? But I'm pointing out the honeymoon phase that during that time, the Congolese government went into a process of bringing all the militias to the table in Nairobi. And Kenya has financial interest in DRC. They are very involved in real estate, even in the financial sector. Two of the largest banks in DRC are Kenyan banks. One of them is Equity. All government processing of a financial transaction is done through Equity Bank in DRC. And that's connected to the former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, who was who also led the process. It's important for you also to think about it, right? You see a process with politicians, but you do not know what are the financial interests behind it. Right? It's not just that Uhuru Kenyatta wants to be a mediator. He wants to also protect financial interests there. But the discussion in Nairobi is for all the militia groups with the Congolese government to find a way to put down the guns so that we can move forward. Those two processes are the stalemate, mainly because I strongly believe, based on the evidence I'm seeing so far, that Rwanda is not interested in peace. The reason why I'm saying that very forcefully is that through the negotiation in Rwanda, which came into a stalemate in November of 2024, there was a discussion around solving the security problem of Rwanda. And the security problem of Rwanda is that, what is stated is that Rwanda has a security threat in the DRC. They call them the FDLR. They call them the Hutu genocidaire. And a plan was agreed between ministers and military officers about a demobilization plan of the FDLR. So everything was agreed and presented to the head of state. So Tshisekedi needed to fly into Rwanda, and of course Paul Kagame needed to fly into Rwanda to sign this agreement to end this issue of security threat. Guess what happened? Kagame never showed up. So when we hear the narrative that's presented, and that's where I will end, right? That we will follow the story of the Congo based on the soundbite in the news. And a reporter will tell you what's happening in the Congo based on what these government officials tell them. So I'll play a random official. I say, Congo is arming FDLR rebel troops. This is a security threat. Guess what a journalist writes? The Rwandan minister of what, say XYZ. Then we take that analysis and make it fact. Without even pointing out to the fact that the people who are saying that this is a security threat are refusing to actually end this situation, right? And that same explanation I just gave, you can also transpose that to the comment you share with them, right? That whenever we even speak about ethnicity in the Congo, for most of you, you know Banyamulenge, right? You know Tutsi, right? You know Hutu. Do you know Bateke? Do you know Bangala? Do you know Banande? In the Congo, we have 400 ethnic groups. How come in the consciousness of people around the world, when they speak about the Congo, their framework falls into the two ethnic groups I just mentioned? Oh, three, right? Because they've created a narrative which, whenever you are coming into that framework, then the first thing you think about is what happened in Rwanda, and you try to make sense of what's happening in the Congo from the context of Rwanda, then you forget that the perpetrator of violence in DRC are well known, the companies involved are well known, are documented. This is what made last February, right, this February, at the UN Security Council, 15 countries, including 3 African countries, voted for a resolution called Resolution 2773. One of the first points of that resolution, these 15 countries and 3 African countries, what did they agree to? The first thing they asked in that resolution was for Rwandan troops to leave Congolese soil. That the discussion around Congo's territorial integrity is so important that it's even diluted with the US Special Envoy was coming. I'll stop there because I can keep going.
Yeah, because resolutions don't get people out. It has to be enforced. And so let's look at how you enforce it. And this is Omékongo, you mentioned Lebanese guy in your poem, so that's Massa Bulus, who's Trump's envoy to the region. Can you help us understand the United States' role in this conflict and whether this is one of the ways we can enforce these kinds of resolutions?
Well, most definitely. But before I do that, I wanted to give a shout out to this beautiful painting that was made by my daughter, Galela, who's a student here in SPA. And it's actually a tribute to my mom, her grandmother. She had Queen Kasai, because my mom is from Kasai, and these are some of the Ubuntu principles that we were raised with, followed by the Congolese flag behind that, and the very key to life. So I just wanted to shout out that. So we were talking about like the role of the United States, and we have to understand that the United States has always been there. When I talk about the second genocide in less than 100 years, I mean, we go back to the early 1900s, or you look at Dunlop and the bicycle company. Like America and parts of the world needed bicycle tires, and so they took the rubber from Congo. We called it red rubber. Why? Because they were cutting off the hands of our kids if we didn't produce enough rubber for that. So when I talk about that second genocide, that's what I'm talking about. The United States has always been there. We talk about Mobutu, who was who outlasted 7 U.S. presidents, ruling for over 30 years. He was discovered by George Bush Sr. in 1957 when he was with the CIA, who said, this could be our guy in Congo. So when you run down the list, like the U.S. has always been present in what's taking place in the Congo, and of course, we can talk about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba and the CIA and the like. So that history is direct. But when we come to now, one of the things I think is important to talk about as it relates to the United States is your connection and the roles that we could be playing in helping put pressure on the United States to do better. Because all of us are wearing genocide. All of us, if our devices light up, that's genocide. Like that's Congo in our PlayStations, that's Congo in our Xboxes and our cell phones and so on and so forth. Do we have the courage and the strength to call on companies like Microsoft and Apple and all of them to do more? Are we willing to have boycotts and not boycotts, right? I see everybody I know who's involved in Congolese activism is also the same, calling for peace in Gaza and free Palestine. Like we're all part of the same movement. The difference between the struggles is that we're wearing the conflict in Congo right now. And so we're all connected. And so who's putting the pressure on your congressperson, on your city councilors, on your state senators, on your U.S. senators, to actually ask them about what they're doing? When I was talking about Lebanese liaisons, right? I wrote that poem that I shared with y'all, Everything Is Still Happening. I wrote that poem in 2002. Right? Because the connections still run deep. And then on top of that, what are we demanding? Kabbalah is one of the OGs with Friends of the Congo. And if you don't know Friends of the Congo and his brothers' organization, they're here. You got to get involved with them. Friends of the Congo, for example, has been calling on our U.S. artists to also be speaking up on what's taking place in the Congo. Why is Kendrick Lamar performing for Kagame in Rwanda? John Legend just there a couple of weeks ago performing in Rwanda. You got these organizations like Move Africa, using Rwanda as to budget it up as the shining beacon of the continent. We can be calling that out. How many of us are watching the NBA playoffs, looking at the NBA, looking to make Kagame a darling of the West by having the Africa Basketball League based in Rwanda? And players from Burundi protested because they didn't want to wear t-shirt jerseys saying Visit Rwanda on their jerseys. But Kagame can come to the United States and be front row at the Golden State Warriors games. NASCAR is looking to do work in Rwanda as well. The list is going on and on and on because Kagame is a master marketer. So when we talk about the role of the United States, we have that direct history going back decades and decades and decades. But even if you watch a movie, Soundtrack to a Coup, they use black artists in the 60s to help promote this, U.S. policy. And so we have to do a better job of educating ourselves so we can put more pressure on our government to do better as it relates to Congo, because they're benefiting from how I ended my poem. They're benefiting from our ignorance and our silence. But your silence is compliance. You are part of the problem if you are not saying anything.
That's very well said. But let me play devil's advocate for a minute. Rwanda is tiny compared to Congo. Congo is potentially Africa's richest country. Why is Rwanda telling these stories, spinning these stories in the Western media? Where's the Congolese pushback? What is the Congolese government doing? Why don't we know about things from the Congolese perspective? What's happening in that country?
And I know we can all join in on this one. In my opinion, Kagame took advantage of the Rwandan genocide to play victim to the world. And so what you had with the US, you had the ACRI, the African Crisis Response Initiative, all these countries came together to help prop up Rwanda. You had movies, Hotel Rwanda, Don Cheadle, all of that. And so what he did with his strategy is he kind of worked to turn Rwanda to make them look like what some people would call...
It's a genocide already.
Right, but he tried to play on what people call the Rwandans, turn them into the Jews of Africa. And what I mean by that is he played on that narrative because he knows that in this country there's reverence and respect for what happened during the Holocaust and what happened with Nazi Germany and the genocide that took place there. And he knows that America is rightfully connected with understanding that story. And so he tried to play that in a Rwandan context when what he's doing, he's actually more like the Hitler of Africa. But because we don't know that story, as Kagame is saying, three ethnicities, we tie it to Rwanda, we talk about Congo, and so he has a better marketing strategy, a better marketing campaign than Congo. And if you keep Congo in disarray, how can you build an international narrative?
So that's the marketing side, but facts on the ground also shows that the Congolese government has underperformed. They can't even hire the right mercenaries. These Romanians they're losing. That they're asking Chad to come in. I don't understand how a country so rich cannot organize its defense. Especially now that you can pay people to fight for you. I don't understand. Help me understand. I'm from Ghana. It's a poor country. We don't have the resources that you have. But I just don't understand how you can be so rich and also be so weak to the extent that your tiny neighbor who has just come out of a genocide can invade you. Kamal, do you want to?
Yes, Rwanda is not doing it alone. It's very important to know that the Rwanda military doesn't manufacture a weapon. The Rwanda military does not have a store where you can buy night vision goggle, GPS jamming system, surface-to-air missiles, anti-drone radar, right? Those things that I'm mentioning are things that's written in the UN group of experts report in terms of the military equipment that they have. So why does Rwanda have a superb military? It's because they are armed by the West. Last year, the European Union gave Rwanda 20 million euros for the military operation that Rwanda does in Mozambique. Do you know that Rwandan soldiers are in Mozambique? Yes, no? But they are there to serve mostly French interests and Total. So the weaponry that I receive from the West is there. Now, don't quote the Congolese inadequacy, right? But quote Antonio Guterres. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, right, said in an interview on France 24 that the UN peacekeepers, not the Congolese army, right, the UN peacekeepers can't fight the M23 because their weaponry is more sophisticated than what the UN has. So of course the Congolese military is inadequate to fight them. But the UN peacekeepers, the Secretary General is telling us that they can't, right? Based on the fact of the ground. So when you understand it from the perspective, it's not about the Congolese government. I hope none of us on the panel, we are spokesperson of the Congolese government, right? We can provide critique of one, that the government of the Congo doesn't represent the Congolese people. One, they were not elected by Congolese. Why do I say that? In 2018, if you follow the electoral process, you will know that Tshisekedi, who's the president today, did not win the 2018 election. Right? So, just as it was the case with Mobutu, where we never chose our leader, our leaders are imposed on us, and whenever they do something that is bad, then they look at us and say, are you Congolese inadequate? And the last point is even the most, I don't know if I should say the most adequate military, the US military, right? The US military was not able to fight the Taliban. You left your weapons there, right? So that in the military terrain, it's more to look at what is actually unfolding that makes it hard for the Congolese army to fight. But we do know that Congolese who are not in the military, that who are called the Wazalendos, are the reason why it took 3 days for the M23 to take over the city of Goma. African intelligence in its article of taking over the city of Goma said in their article that the taking over of the city of Goma was done with the support of assault drones. Not from the Congolese military, but for the Rwanda military. So you had assault drones, you had at least 4,000 Rwandan troops inside, and ordinary Congolese who decided to join the Congolese military and fight with them, held them in that city for 3 days before they took it. Unfortunately, 7,000 people died in the process. That we know that the Congolese people themselves, outside of what is happening in the government, are in the fight to not just challenge the government, but they're also clear that there is an invading force on the outside. Last point, for those of you who've been engaged in the Palestinian struggle for peace and justice in Palestine, you will also know that the Palestinians do not support the Palestinian Authority, right? So, at the same time, you know that you're fighting for the freedom of the Palestinian, while understanding that the Palestinian Authority many times have not reflected the will of the Palestinian people. So that's how I will respond to it.
Okay, Claude, let me give you a different question because you basically tell them that there's no military solution to this conflict because somebody's backing them in this strong. So is that political pathway out of this that you see? And can you talk a little bit about the role of Qatar in the mediation, but also South Africa? South Africa is also in the truth SADC, right?
Yeah.
So is that a political process?
I'm glad you brought up South Africa because I was going to follow up to what Kambale just said, using South Africa as an example. What's the percentage of white people in South Africa?
Small.
Anybody know? Yeah, right. It's less than 10%. They not only controlled South Africa of 50 million people, they controlled Namibia, they invaded Mozambique, Zambia, and bombed a bunch of other countries, a bunch of surrounding countries. So that's just to answer the previous question where the size of Rwanda doesn't matter, it's the weapons. You know, the white South Africans had the weapons to control. As long as the US, the UK, the European Union, and all of these major powerful countries are arming Rwanda, Rwanda can overpower the Congo. They can overpower any size country as long as they have the most powerful arms and weapons to fight, to wage this war. So I just wanted to use South Africa as an example.
The European support is not absolute, right? Because there's sanctions now. Rwanda has actually expelled Belgium, because they accused Belgium of supporting Congo. And so
that's a brand new thing.
Can also rally support.
That's a brand new thing that's been going, but it's been going on for 30 years.
Okay.
So we'll see the result of the sanctions, but we have an example. In 2012, there were sanctions on Rwanda. It was the first time this group that keeps rebranding called itself the M23. You know what happened months after the sanctions? The M23 left the Congo. They were occupying vast territories of the Congo. They went to refugee camps in Uganda, in Congo, and they came back 10 years later in 2022 with the support again. So as long as, when the support is not there, they're not that powerful. When Rwanda is sanctioned, the support is not there. Now to the question, going back to the political solution, the long-lasting solution to what is happening in the Congo is justice. There has to be accountability. What's happened, and Kambale touched on it a little bit, you talked about it a little bit in your poem, the incompetence of the Congolese elites, which is also what you were asking about. Not only incompetence, but there are a lot of issues with the Congolese political elites. However, at the end of the day, all of the processes, the peace processes that we're talking about, for one, they serve as a war strategy, again, going back to Uganda in the 80s, Rwanda in the 90s, Congo in the 2000s, where they fight, they stop, negotiate, regroup, fight again, take over more territory, stop, negotiate, regroup, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. That's how that process works. Now, with SADC will actually engage in the fighting against the invasion of Congo. The solutions that have been proposed, always there is a clause of amnesty for fighting groups. This incentivizes violence because all I have to do is take up arms, take territory, fight, negotiate, then there's amnesty, and I become a government official. You talked about it in the poem, you talked about it in the peace processes. There has to be accountability. The way to peace, and one of the starting tools that's at the international disposal is the UN mapping report that came out in 2010. That report documented only the most serious, and I say only, emphasis only, the most serious crimes committed in Congo between 93 and 2003. Those crimes included crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the UN said possible genocide. And the UN is a diplomatic organization, so it's watered down. But genocide was mentioned as one of the crimes. They had recommendations in the report. If those recommendations are followed, it actually lays a path to peace because it includes accountability and reparations for the victims. As long as it's about making political deals where I take up arms, I fight with you, and then we team up, we turn around, we fight Kambale, and he turns around, and he joins us, and we fight this group, and then there is a peace deal, and we're integrated in the government, you become vice president, I become vice president, he becomes vice president, and we're integrated into the military. We are in charge of the people we were abusing yesterday, today. That is not gonna work. The solution is accountability. And we, the international community, have a lot to do with that. Again, I keep speaking about US support because we're here in Washington. Taxpayers' money is being used to actually fuel this conflict, in addition to, of course, our consumerism and the resources that we're consuming. So the solution isn't so political, it's justice.
Okay, so let's give Professor Omékongo the last word. And since you are such a towering figure in the diaspora, can you tell us what the diaspora is doing to help bring this come to an end? And also to our students, you were telling them to call their representatives. What should they say? What should we ask the politicians to do in the Congo?
That's a great question, because if you're not out there fortifying yourself with the knowledge, then you become just as much a part of the problem. Passion is great, energy is great, but if it's passion and energy with ignorance, then you're not helping us out. And so the first thing that people have to do is you have to educate yourself. You have to go to organizations like Friends of the Congo, and you have to sign up for the newsletters. You have to, read the papers, read the policies, watch the documentaries like Lumumba, if y'all are passionate about what we're saying, and then you in front of a U.S. official tomorrow, what are you gonna say, right? So the first step is really education. The second step is, what activist tools are you willing to use? I see a lot of activism towards so many other things in this country, and it's necessary, they need to happen. You can apply those tools to Congo. One of the things I saw, Kambale was on Democracy Now! a few weeks ago, and one of the things he was talking about, and I don't know if you have time to get into it, but it's people don't even understand Congo's resources are connected to the AI boom. And the energy that it takes for AI. It's people constantly play off of our ignorance, right? And so that's the number one thing that people need to do, is to get educated. And then next, again, look at who I talked about, who your representatives are. 3, look at ways to call out your companies. What these companies are doing, the Apples, all of them, it's all out there. It's all out there. third, I don't know if I'm third, fourth, fifth, whatever, you know, who has the ability, the courage, again, to call out their artists? You know, John Legend and I, you know, follow each other on Twitter for years. I know his manager and so on and so forth. When I found out he was performing, they had to speak up. Because again, the silence is compliance. I don't see any protests, you know, for Congo. I don't see any people sitting in front of anybody's office. I don't see anyone circulating any petitions. Like, y'all have the tools. What you don't fully have is the knowledge. And right now, as we're talking, the Trump administration is looking at making a deal with Congo, just like with Ukraine, for control of a good portion of its resources so they can give it security against Rwanda. And so we're seeing a self-fulfilling cycle. You know, the cycle is continuing because of our ignorance. And so there's lots of things, but again, that knowledge, if y'all learned like one thing here tonight, build on that. Learn with that.
Is there a website that people can go to get more information?
I mean, I'm just learning about your organization. I've been reading about your organization. I think it is powerful. I feel like for me, the number one resource that I've been seeing over the last few years is Friends of the Congo, .org. What Kambali is doing, what Maurice and like that would be my first resource, first go-to. And then within that, there are resources there of work they're doing not only here, but this is also really important. What's important about Friends of the Congo is that they're actually connected to Congo. Like actually working with Congolese on the ground, actually traveling back and forth, as opposed to like, we're just an organization here that thinks what's happening in Congo is wrong, and so we're speaking up. That's important. But the true connection with the ground, you need that so you can better build yourself. You're gonna, travel to Congo, do work, see what's going on. Y'all have the ability in a place like this, in a space like this. Some of y'all might be balling. I just got a professor's salary, but y'all might, come from communities where y'all balling. Support with your money. Support the organizations like that as well, because the dollars we're already wearing genocide. We've already bought it. Some of our money can go towards supporting real causes as well. Those are some of the things that we can do. And of course, you can always support the artists who are putting out music talking about the Congo, like yours truly. But not for me financially, but just spreading. I got, hip hop tracks, spoken word tracks, just spreading the word so people can see that there are other artists. I'm doing an event this Saturday. You can email me and find out on Georgia Avenue where there's gonna be other art poets and artists and dancers and stuff supporting Peace in the Congo as well. Come out to that, network with people.
Fantastic. I think we should stop here and take questions.
For me on the policy.
There is a law in the US called Public Law 109456. It was written by Barack Obama in 2006, signed into law by George Bush. There are two sections in that law that's not implemented. Section 105 calls for the Secretary of State to withhold aid to any nation destabilizing the Congo. Since I started with Friends of the Congo to now, we push for that. There need to be withholding of aid, particularly military aid that the United States provide to the Rwandan military, which ends up in the Congo. They sanctioned a Rwandan general, but they did not stop military aid, and we know where that's going. The second section of that law, Public Law 109456, is section 107. It calls for a special envoy to the Great Lakes region. And everybody has been fooled in thinking that Massad Boulos is a special envoy to the Great Lakes region. He's not the special envoy to the Great Lakes region. Right? The State Department on its website says this, that he is the special advisor to the Department of State, which means he doesn't have certain clearance to deal with the issue of the Congo. It's important for me to share this because I've seen this game since 2006 to now, that the US administration, no matter Republican or Democrat, do not want to appoint a special envoy. The last special envoy to the Great Lakes region we had was Tom Perriello. Since Tom Perriello, we have not had one. And they do not want to do that. So one means, no, Massad Boulos is a special envoy to the Middle East, but for the Congo and the region, he's a special advisor. So he reports to Rubio and not Trump, and he has some implications for that. And for me, as an activist, when I share that with people in the room, I say the US is breaking the law, right? The law says, withhold aid to nations that stabilize the Congo, appoint a special envoy. Yet the law is not enforced. So on the policy side, we push for public law 109456 to be enforced and follow through everything in terms of advocacy to make sure that we're able to enforce those two sections.
Fantastic. Let's take a couple of questions.
Over here.
Yes, please.
Hi, thank you so much for.
I got it. We want to hear you.
Sorry, I just wanted to say thank you, so for such an insightful talk, thank you for your time.
Can you tell us who you are?
I'm sorry, hi, I'm Tuli, I'll leave it at that. Anyways, I did have a question, you mentioned a lot about the connections and opportunities that are available here to, assist with this cause. Education to a certain degree is a luxury. Access to people like you, connections like this in this private institution that we are currently sitting in is definitely a privilege. Having state senators, having people who are willing, people in power who are willing to even listen to you is a privilege. I'm from Zimbabwe, and I'm wondering what other African countries, other citizens of the continent, you mentioned being from Ghana and being like, I don't know what's going on, right? Like, outside of the West, which we often turn to, what can we do? And especially in instances where there's not necessarily as clear of a path as clear labels. Sorry, that's the second question.
Claude, do you want to?
Yeah.
go down?
Thank you. I'm actually,
Excuse me. I got aggressive there. I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing happening in the last few months on the continent with the awakening that's actually happening around what is happening in Congo. There are people in South Africa, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Liberia, waiting for Ghana.
Yeah, that's bigger problems.
One of the work is part of the work that we do is connecting to educate and to share and raise awareness on these issues. So, step one, check into friendsofthecongo.org, freecongo.org, our organization, adland.org. Follow us and see the type of action that we're taking, the information that we're putting out there, and share the information. I think the battery's up. Share the information, starting with your network. Every person, back in the day, a lot of the liberation movements used leaflets. You had to travel to drop those things. You can drop leaflets from your phones, from the Congo, from the piece of the Congo that you have, through your social media. Raise awareness, make sure people understand and they are clear on what is happening. That is number one. Narrative is one of the most important things when it comes to conflicts. And as the question was asked earlier, and as you also talked about, Rwanda and Kagame are excellent at PR. But that PR has to be debunked with the reality of what the people are actually living. And so people who are connected with the people on the ground can actually provide the information of what is happening in addition to what is widely available. When you have that information, share the information. That's step one. Step two, it's already said, contribute to those organizations. That's also a concrete step. Invite people who have the knowledge to your community beyond the school and other places to actually, continue to spread the word. And then as the ground swells of the opinion, the same way that apartheid South Africa, I use that example. It failed because the international opinion was so against it, in spite of countries like the US actually having Nelson Mandela on the list of terrorists until the late 2000s. So those would be my, what I would offer as solutions. Start with raising awareness. That would be number one.
Any more questions? Yes, please.
Thank you.
You can have.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm Pauline and I'm from the Congo. Thank you so much for the presentation, and the poem was so touching. I have two questions. The first question, I want to know your opinion when it comes to Congo organizing the army. Do you think that Congo should choose a path on making their army strong to defend their borders? And if that will make any difference. And the second question is, because Rwanda and Uganda, the length of this conflict is also dependent upon Museveni's regime and Kagame's regime. Do you think a change in those regimes would bring a kind of solution to the conflict? Thank you.
Take that.
The first question on the reform of the Congolese military must be done, but that does not equate. It's not the solution for peace, right? It's something that we have to do, right? We have to have a justice reform, we have to have a military reform, and so on. And that question comes from the perspective that Congo is so weak that we believe that strengthening the military that's going to solve that. But my contention is to go back to why the conflict exists and the context. Congo's territorial integrity is violated. Congo is a member state of the African Union, right? And the fact that it's being violated is setting a precedent for Togo tomorrow and wake up and say, I'm gonna help people in Western Togoland to become a country. Because the airway in Ghana are mistreated, right? Every country on the African continent can have the narrative. So when I'm looking at the situation in Congo, what I tell Africans, it's not really about the Congo, it's about the founding fathers of the African continent, Kwame Nkrumah, Ben Bella, Nasser and others, put something very important in the AU Charter, right? The respect of territorial integrity, because they knew if we try to change the border today, it would cause conflict all across the continent, right? So they said, for now, as we build up African unity, let's keep it as is and build our strength. So that's the context. So the military reform, it has to happen, but it's not the issue. Because if you look at the remaining 7 bordering nations, right? The only one I would say we have that similar issue is Angola, right? Most people don't even know that Angola has taken a town in Congo right now for the past 15 years, right? And nobody talks about it. Why? Because everyone is focused on what Rwanda and Uganda is doing. But we don't see the same issue in Congo Brazzaville or in Central African Republic and Tanzania. So that will be my contention. The second one was on Congolese mobilizing.
No, the second one was like if the change in
Regime change.
The regime change it will be up to the Rwandans and to the Ugandans to decide the future of the country. What I see in some of these countries, that specifically Uganda, there is a popular movement, and Ugandans are connecting. Ugandan activists are connecting with Congolese activists. Rwandan activists are connecting with Congolese activists. So the people of the region, if you start paying close attention to them, you will notice that even in Rwanda, if you follow it closely, you will notice who are the people organizing for change. My appeal will be for the people of the region to mobilize into the Africa Great Lakes Conference, where the youth of that region, we will have our voice that's outside of what the governments are saying. Because the people of the region, we don't have problem with one another. I'm sitting beside him, we are speaking about the Congo. So that will be the solution. But each country will have to decide the future of the country. But as in the region, we should come together to have an alternative voice than what's in the mainstream media.
So if I may follow up before we go back to the audience, I'm curious as to why you think that a stronger military cannot be part of the solution. Because you just tell Angola is taking part of your territory, Rwanda is taking the Kivus, and let me give you a West African problem. If there are no cracks in your wall, the lizard cannot come to your room. So what's happening in the DRC in Congo with all the resources in the world that smaller neighbors can come in and grab your territory? And organizing the military, isn't that part of the solution to defend your territory? Obviously, the African Union is not going to defend your territorial integrity. They don't have the capacity to do that. So this is something that you can do. Why hasn't that been part of the solution?
I hope I didn't lose anyone, right? I did say that justice reform and military reform is necessary, but it's not what's going to bring peace in Congo. We've had a strong military. Rwanda has a strong military. But when was the last time you heard a Rwandan inside of Rwanda speaking about their country? Is that what we want for Congo?
No, but you don't want them taking your land.
Yeah, but a strong military without civilian checks and systems of the country that's not functioning is not what we want. Well, we want all state institutions working together. That's why I brought up the justice, because the military, who's going to hold them accountable if you have a very strong one? Of course, we know we need strong soldiers, but also we are assuming that Congolese are not fighting. That is why the territory is there. The challenge is they don't have the same weaponry. We have a larger population. Our laws doesn't allow every Congolese to have a weapon. I mean, we can go into the justice reform saying how we can remove the former rebels of yesterday who have integrated into the military. That I don't think those reforms are the thing that we should focus on, saying that will bring peace. I strongly believe justice is more important than military reform. I also believe that accountability for violating a territory, regardless of what is happening with internal dynamic, should be looked at first.
I would like to add something to that. I would like to add something to that, where I also see that, yes, it would be good to have a stronger military to defend the territory. Again, it depends on the weapons of the invaders. But there is, and this is why you guys here in the audience have a lot of power to also influence what could happen. In 2020, Rwanda's government lured a man from Texas, took him to Dubai, kidnapped him from Dubai, took him and tortured him in Rwanda. They put him on a sham trial, and they sentenced him to 25 years. His name is Paul Rusesabagina, if any of you have heard of the film Hotel Rwanda. They held him for almost 3 years. And Paul Kagame said, I will never release this man unless it would take a whole invasion to release this man. The invasion happened. It wasn't military. The US said, you took our legal resident, so we are gonna hold $90 million in aid that we were gonna send you, unless you release him. You know where he is now? Chilling in Texas right now. Yeah, so there are so many things. A lot of times people talk about military solutions and everything, and I always say, have we tried everything else before we go to the violence? If Rwanda was isolated, nobody's trading with Rwanda, all of the minerals that they are smuggling and stealing out of the Congo will be useless. There are so many different ways to bring about accountability, in similar ways to what happened to apartheid South Africa, that are not being used. Those tools can be used, and each one of us can actually play a role in that. So military is good, but again, to bring about lasting solution, there has to be accountability, there has to be justice, and there has to be serious consequences for invading and violating people's territorial integrity.
Okay, I think, can we take one more question before we go? Oh, we almost out of time, people have classes, so yes, gentlemen, you get the last word, and then we'll be done. I think they'll be around, so if you want to hang around and talk to them, that would be fine. But
can you guys hear me? Okay. Although I'm a UCSB student, I'm interning for the Oscar Center for International Relations. So my question was, you said that the solution is to educate our fellow students and our fellow people, all our friends. Why do you think there's such a lack of information about Congo in universities and the public general? Because at UCSB, everyone that talks about Palestine, I would go do you know this is happening in Congo as well, or Indonesia, or in Armenia, where I'm from? there'd be like just complete silence. So why do you think that is, and what's causing that?
Everything is propaganda. Like everything in society is teaching you to do one thing or another. Like teaching you how to like cross the street without getting hit by a car is propaganda because people have been in the hospital. Like everything. So when it comes to media narratives, everything is done intentionally. As a rapper, I grew up on like 90s hip hop. A lot of rappers like Dead Prez and a lot of these guys used to have a lot of like anti-white messages in their music. Well, pro-black messages, but they got perceived as anti-white. That didn't work for the record industry, so they got rid of that and made sure they propped up guys like NWA and people that have the, the B words and the N words all up in their music because it's intentional. So y'all gotta understand, they say if you wanna hide something from people, put it in a book. Because if they can keep you distracted with other narratives, you're not going to learn the truth. Like, I had a student once who wants to study, be a lawyer, studying the Constitution, and she was a senior in college and didn't learn about the 13th Amendment and how that kept slavery alive, and started crying in my class when she found that out. So that's the point. There are like you said, there are so many stories. I'm thinking I have a conversation about the chocolate you're eating in Cote d'Ivoire. Like, people don't want you to know because they know, particularly that students, historically, Vietnam War, so on and so forth, have been the spearheads for change. So if they keep you distracted, keep you playing the Xbox, not knowing the Xbox is Xing out lives in Congo with the resources in it, then you're good. So the job is for y'all to break the media narratives. It's to break the algorithms on your websites. It's to sign up for organizations because they know that once you know, stuff's really gonna hit the fan. So it's all intentional. And that's why everything we're saying here has all been about education. Because an educated mind is the best soldier that we need for the Congo right now.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Claudine. Thank you, Sybil, our incredible professors here. Can we get a round of applause? Put it all together.
Okay.
Thank you everybody for coming. And as I said, we have 2 other events, one on Armenia and one on Indonesia and East Timor. So please follow us and you'll receive information about the events. Thank you so much.
So,
yes, sir. Yeah. Hey, somebody's trying to do it.
It's not much, but yeah, I'm gonna say you apologize. Yeah.
Whoa, how you know that? You said that. I did? I don't want to turn. Just come on, like, yeah, I'm going home tomorrow, like,
Are you going to the